Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up a little bit of what Senator Risch has talked about. First, congratulations to you and to your family, and I appreciate you coming by to visit on issues. I want to talk about the U.S. Arms Trade Treaty. When Secretary Kerry came before this committee in January of this year, I asked him during his confirmation process if he would support any treaty that allows the United Nations to establish and maintain a gun registry on law-abiding U.S. gun owners. He stated in writing that we will not support a treaty that impacts domestic arms transfers or creates a UN gun registry. I have that UN Arms Treaty here, and Article 12 is called record keeping. It encourages countries to maintain records on the importation of conventional arms, including small arms. It specifically requests that the states maintain records on the quantity, the value, the model, the type, and the end user. These records, it says, must be maintained for a minimum of 10 years. Article 13, titled Reporting, that requires signatory states to issue annual reports to the UN on all imports and exports. So the question I have is, do you believe that this framework could lead to a UN gun registry?
Thank you, Senator. Let me start just by saying again that we, in this administration, and certainly I, if I had the privilege of going to New York, would never do anything that would infringe on U.S. sovereignty or that would interfere in any way with American law. Second Amendment rights are paramount. American law is paramount. The Constitution is paramount. Again, in terms of what the UN's designs are in taking that treaty forward, I'm not myself familiar with those. I think what's important is that Secretary Kerry has given you the assurance that nothing the administration put forward with regard to that treaty would ever contemplate a gun registry in this country or our participation in a gun registry. So I think that's the key point, is irrespective of the provisions that you have pointed to, the United States, in dealing with this body in any future engagement on the Arms Trade Treaty, would never, again, allow anything in that treaty to interfere with American law or American practice.
Okay. So then the simple question of, do you support the United Nations of establishing and maintaining a gun registry on law-abiding U.S. gun owners?
No.
The answer is no. Thank you. Following up on also what some other members have asked about in terms of the UN budget, reporting to Congress, in 2009, 2010, the Office of Management and Budget provided Congress with a list of total U.S. contributions to the United Nations from the State Department, as well as 18 other U.S. departments and agencies, and I believe this information is valuable for all citizens. I think it's important for everyone to understand how the U.S. is spending taxpayer money at the United Nations. I don't want to quiz you on the specifics of the budget, but I would ask, do you support transparency of U.S. funding?
I do, sir.
And support the Congress and the American people receiving a report from OMB on an annual basis on U.S. contributions provided to the UN?
Full transparency. I think to sustain support for, again, the generous contributions that the American people make, you have to provide transparency.
The other question, and you raised the issue of sovereignty. This is your position, very important. Can you just talk a little bit about how you plan on preserving and protecting American sovereignty within the United Nations?
Well, one starts, of course, sir, by asserting again and again the importance of American sovereignty. It also involves protecting the interests and projecting the values of the United States within the United Nations. When countries seek to judge us and take steps, any steps that would interfere again with domestic law or domestic practice, to stand up against that and to fight for our laws to be ascendant as they are within this country.
Can you talk a little about your commitment to challenging the actions of the United Nations that run contrary to our standards, our values, and our interests?
Well, I think there are maybe at least two dimensions to that. One, on the mismanagement side, that certainly runs contrary to our aspirations for how we govern ourselves. And then, again, on the values side, whether it's corruption or those countries that trample human dignity or that stand with human rights abusers, we have to use the bully pulpit and be forceful in contesting that wherever we can, and also creatively thinking about what other tools we can do beyond speaking out, what tools we could put in place in order to halt those practices.
Can you talk a little bit about what measures you might use in assessing whether or not to veto a specific UN resolution, just as you would think about those things?
Obviously, any discussion or decision about using the veto would be something that one would have as in the context of the interagency and so forth, but we will not allow anything to go through the Security Council that we deem a threat to U.S. national security interests. And that's, I think, a broad standard, but a critical one.
Yeah. And I wanted to follow up a little bit with Senator Risch on the Palestinian Authority. I have a number of written questions that I'll submit. I'm just wondering how you're going to make it clear to the Palestinians that, that their actions at the United Nations will have serious implications and consequences.
Well, I know from having worked this issue for the last 2 years that we make it clear in every bilateral encounter we have with the Palestinians that it will have serious consequences. Moreover, it will have serious consequences not just to the U.S.-Palestinian bilateral relationship, but to the peace process, which the Palestinians have invested in and which all of us have an interest in seeing bear fruit. I think there's legislation up here as well that would impose direct symbolic and financial consequences in terms of the Palestinian office and some of the funding, and the Palestinians have been made well aware of those consequences as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator